Hello, and welcome to Byline of Time, where we present obscure historical events. Today, we present Operation Acoustic Kitty, a 1960s CIA operation. On a quiet street in Washington, D.C., sometime in the mid-1960s, a small gray cat sits perfectly still on the sidewalk, unremarkable, ordinary, just another cat minding its own business. Except, this cat has a microphone in its ear, a transmitter under its fur, and a wire running through its tail. It's not here to chase pigeons. It's here to spy. This was Operation Acoustic Kitty, the CIA's bold, bizarre, and ultimately disastrous attempt to turn a living animal into a secret listening device. And somehow, it's all true. Today, we're going deep into one of the strangest projects in Cold War history. A $20 million mission that tried to blend biology, technology, and espionage, and learned the hard way that cats do not make good spies. To understand why anyone would fund such a project, we have to go back to the Cold War. The 1960s were an age of paranoia and possibility. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a shadow war, a race not only for weapons in space, but for information. Every whisper, every coded message, every offhand remark between diplomats could change the balance of power. And both sides were getting creative. The CIA built tiny listening devices disguised as pens, coins, and even insects. Soviet agents hid microphones inside wall paintings and electric typewriters. But there was a problem. Human spies could be caught, and electronic bugs could be discovered. So the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, the same division that created the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71 Blackbird, began searching for new ways to gather intel. Something unpredictable, something inconspicuous, something alive. And that's when someone, somewhere in Langley, said, "What if we used a cat?" It sounds ridiculous, but to the CIA it made a strange kind of sense. Cats could go anywhere without suspicion. They were common in cities, embassies, and parks. They moved quietly, drew little attention, and could easily blend into the background. The agency approved funding for what would become Operation Acoustic Kitty. The plan was to surgically implant a miniature microphone in the cat's ear canal, connect it to a small transmitter placed near its skull, and then weave an antenna through its fur, possibly along the spine or tail. The idea: the cat could be released near a target, perhaps a Soviet diplomat, and capture their conversation without anyone noticing. In theory, it was brilliant. In practice, it was madness. Cats are famously independent. Unlike dogs, you can't just train a cat to go sit near the ambassador. But the CIA believed they could modify the cat's behavior, surgically, electrically, even chemically, to make it obedient enough for missions. They spent years experimenting with implants, testing radio signals, and figuring out how to power a transmitter small enough to fit inside a living creature. One early memo described the challenge bluntly. The environmental and behavioral variables in using any trained animal are extraordinary. That's CIA code for, "This cat's going to do whatever it wants." At some point, they brought in veterinary surgeons to perform delicate operations. A small microphone was implanted inside the ear canal, with a wire running down through the body to a transmitter placed in the chest cavity. Another thin wire, acting as an antenna, was sewn along the cat's spine and into its tail. All told, the procedure reportedly took several hours, and somehow, incredibly, the test cat survived. But there was more to worry about than surgery. The cat had to move naturally, respond to commands, and, most importantly, stay focused on its mission. Researchers tried to train the cat to walk short distances and sit near specific people or sounds. They even experimented with audio cues, tones that meant go or stop. Some versions of the story say they attempted to control its hunger, so it wouldn't wander off, looking for food during surveillance. The idea of controlling a living animal, like a robot, was revolutionary and deeply unsettling. Even within the CIA, there were quiet questions about the morality of it all. But the Cold War was an age of extremes, and the line between innovation and insanity was often blurry. After months of development, the CIA was finally ready to test Acoustic Kitty in the field. The mission: to record a conversation between two suspected Soviet officials sitting on a park bench outside the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. A team of agents waited in a van nearby, monitoring the radio feed. The cat was placed on the sidewalk, a few dozen feet away from the target. The agents held their breath. The cat took a few steps forward, turned, and then, according to the most infamous version of the story, walked straight into the street. Moments later, it was struck by a taxi. That was the end of Operation Acoustic Kitty. $15 to $20 million spent, years of research, and their high-tech feline agent didn't make it to the first target. At least, that's how the story was told for decades. When the CIA declassified portions of the project in the early 2000s, new details emerged, and some contradicted the dramatic cat hit by a taxi tale. According to one declassified memo, the cat wasn't killed immediately. The CIA claimed they recovered the equipment, removed the implants, and that the animal lived afterward. The official conclusion described the project as a technical success. The devices did work, but a practical failure. Translation: the cat's biology, instincts, and unpredictability made real missions impossible. In other words, they could make a cat into a spy in theory, but not in reality. Former CIA officer Victor Marchetti, who first leaked the story, said it best: "You can train a cat to do a lot of things, but the minute you turn its head for a second, it's off chasing a butterfly." So what's the legacy of Operation Acoustic Kitty? It's become a punchline in spy history, a symbol of Cold War excess, and of just how far intelligence agencies were willing to go in their race for innovation. But it's also a glimpse into a fascinating era of experimentation. The same division that dreamed up spy cats also explored robotic insects, cyborg pigeons, and fish-shaped drones. Even today, modern defense agencies research animal-machine hybrids, from remote-controlled beetles to neural implants in sharks. In a way, Operation Acoustic Kitty was decades ahead of its time. It failed spectacularly, but it planted the seeds for what we now call biorobotics. And it raised a moral question that still lingers. When does scientific curiosity cross the line into cruelty? Operation Acoustic Kitty reminds us that intelligence work is often as absurd as it is ingenious. It's a story of ambition colliding with reality, and of people so determined to outsmart their enemies that they forgot. Cats are not tools, they're cats. In the end, the CIA learned a lesson that every cat owner already knows. You can't control a cat. You can only hope it decides to cooperate. So next time you see your cat staring at a blank wall, twitching its tail like it's listening to something, maybe, just maybe, it's still on a secret mission. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into Cold War strangeness, hit that like button, subscribe for more odd chapters of history, and tell me in the comments, would you trust a cat with national security?